In a small village in the heart of Pakistan, a group of women from different walks of life had come together to learn self-defense. The class was led by a woman named Kulsoom, a former martial arts champion who had dedicated her life to empowering women in her community. The room was filled with anticipation and determination as the women gathered to learn the techniques that could potentially save their lives. One of the students, a young woman named Farida, had heard about the class from a friend. She had been hesitant to join at first, feeling that she was too old and weak to learn self-defense. But the recent spike in reports of sexual assault in her village had left her feeling vulnerable and afraid. With the encouragement of her friend, she decided to take a chance and attend the class. On the first day of the course, Kulsoom began by teaching the women basic self-defense techniques, such as how to escape from a chokehold or how to kick an attacker in the groin. The women practiced these moves with each other, laughing and grunting as they stumbled through the exercises. As the weeks went by, the women grew more confident in their abilities. They began to share their own stories of harassment and assault, finding solidarity and support in each other's experiences. They also learned more advanced techniques, such as how to target an attacker's pressure points and how to use everyday objects as weapons. One day, after several weeks of training, Kulsoom introduced a new technique to the class. "Today, we will learn how to defend ourselves against an attacker who is trying to rape us," she announced, her voice firm and resolute. The women exchanged nervous glances, but they nodded in agreement, knowing that this was a crucial skill for them to learn. Kulsoom demonstrated the technique, showing the women how to grab an attacker's testicles and twist them with force. "This will cause extreme pain and can give you enough time to escape and get help," she explained. The women practiced the move on each other, their faces set in grim determination. Several weeks later, Farida was walking home from the market when she was approached by a man she had never seen before. He was tall and wore a hoodie, his face partially obscured by the shadows. As he stepped closer, Farida could see a sinister glint in his eyes. Her heart raced, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the self-defense techniques she had learned from Kulsoom. "Where are you going, little girl?" the man growled, his voice thick with menace. Farida's blood ran cold, but she kept her composure, replying calmly, "I am not a little girl, and it's none of your business where I am going." The man laughed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're right, it's not my business, but I want to make it my business." He took another step closer, and Farida could see his hand reaching for his waist, as if he were carrying a weapon. Farida knew she had to act quickly. She took a step back and assumed a fighting stance, her eyes locked on the man's hand. "I warn you, I am not defenseless," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I have learned self-defense, and I will not hesitate to use it." The man sneered, seemingly unfazed by Farida's warning. But as he lunged at her, his hand grasping for her throat, Farida was ready. In one swift motion, she grabbed his testicles and twisted with all her might. The man let out a piercing shriek of pain, his face contorting in agony. He dropped to his knees, clutching his groin and gasping for breath. Farida took advantage of his vulnerability and ran, her legs pumping as she sprinted towards her home. When Farida arrived at her house, she locked the door and slid to the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had escaped the attack, but the adrenaline coursing through her body left her shaken and trembling. The next day, word spread throughout the village about Farida's encounter and her use of self-defense techniques to protect herself. Women who had previously been hesitant to join Kulsoom's classes began to reconsider, realizing the importance of empowering themselves and learning to defend their bodies and their dignity. Enrollment in the self-defense classes skyrocketed, with women of all ages and backgrounds coming together to learn from Kulsoom and her team of instructors. Farida, now a living testament to the power of self-defense, became a source of inspiration for the women in her community. She shared her story with others, encouraging them to take control of their own safety and to never underestimate their ability to defend themselves. As the weeks passed, the women in the self-defense classes became more confident and assertive. They began to carry themselves differently, their posture straight and their eyes sharp. They knew that they had the skills and the strength to protect themselves, and this knowledge radiated from them like a beacon. One afternoon, as Kulsoom was teaching a class, a group of men began to gather outside the training center. They jeered and catcalled, mocking the women for learning self-defense and trying to intimidate them into stopping. But the women, their faces set in determined expressions, continued to practice their techniques, ignoring the taunts and the jeers of the men. Kulsoom, seeing the men outside, decided to address them directly. She stepped out of the training center and confronted the men, her voice strong and clear. "You have no right to shame these women for learning to defend themselves," she said, her eyes blazing with anger. "If you have a problem with it, you should be learning self-defense yourself, rather than standing here harassing us." The men, taken aback by Kulsoom's boldness, hesitated for a moment before scurrying away like cornered rats. The women cheered, their spirits lifted by Kulsoom's show of bravery and solidarity. Over time, the village began to change. The number of reported sexual assaults and harassment incidents decreased as the women in the self-defense classes became more vigilant and assertive about their rights. The men in the village, slowly realizing the error of their ways, began to treat the woman with more respect and dignity. They started to understand that women were not just vessels to be possessed and controlled, but individuals with their own minds, bodies, and voices. Farida continued to be an inspiration to the women in her community. She became an active advocate for women's rights, speaking at rallies and conferences, and sharing her story with the world. Her message was simple, but powerful. Every woman has the right to defend herself, and no one has the right to violate her body or her dignity. As the years went by, the self-defense classes continued to thrive, and the village became a model of progress and change. The women in the community were no longer seen as mere objects to be protected, but as agents of change who had the power to defend themselves and shape the future. Kulsoom, Farida, and the other women who had learned self-defense became symbols of strength and resilience, their names whispered with admiration and respect. They had taken control of their own destinies and, in doing so, had changed the destiny of their entire community. And so, the story of Farida and the women of her village spread far and wide, inspiring women across the country to take up self-defense and to stand up for their rights. It was a story of triumph over adversity, of strength in the face of fear, and of the power of the human spirit to rise above even the most seemingly insurmountable odds. For every woman who had learned to defend herself and fought back against her attacker, there was a story of courage and resilience, of hope and determination. And as each woman shared her story, the collective voice of the women of Pakistan grew louder and stronger, echoing across the land and heralding a new era of change and progress.
Please subscribe to my channel Lessons of Life and press the bell notification icon.